Let's translate this into practice. I would call origination, encoding, and part of sending to be a PR measurement activity. I will talk more about this in a moment. I would say the next part are what we often call outputs. This is really the sending and through the transmission channel. This is before the message recipient actually gets the message. There is what I'll call reception, which is actually when the receiver gets and handles it. It's like you receive a basketball when you're playing basketball. Then there is the decoding and the understanding, which is the critical cognitive process, which we can call outtakes or PR outcomes or communications outcomes. And finally, there are the business results. Do they act in a way that our organization would like them to act? Got it? How many of you use a process something like this as you think about communications? Some? Okay. Let me talk more about activities. I would like to suggest that if you think about your communications process in this way, in each of the columns that I'm going to set up, you can specify what metrics you would like to use. Now, in some cases, activities are literally what you did. This is easy. I mean, this is controlled by public relations. It could be an event. It could be a press release. It could be media relations. It could be a website. It could be a tweet. It could be a YouTube clip. It can be anything that you do that you control. It tends to be visible, but it also tends to be under your control. So it doesn't really count for a whole lot. I doubt if your CEO will be very impressed with anything that's a pure output. But it is very important internally within the PR group for operational efficiency, for allocating staff time, for your budget. Are you managing your resources well? So it's an essential metric to use and to keep track of. But the less we can emphasize this to the CMO, the better we'll be doing. The next phase are what I'll call outputs. It's not a very attractive word. This is simply the availability of a message to the target audiences. This you're probably familiar with. We can measure this through media analysis, through social media analysis, through all sorts of other things that we can count. We can correlate it with activities, but it's very important to remember that at this stage in the process, there has been no cognitive change, no emotional change, because we haven't even determined whether the recipient got the message and understood the message. This also is very useful within the PR group. Summaries might be useful higher up, but again, ask yourself the question, will the chief marketing officer or the chief communications officer always be impressed with knowing that you threw 3 events? They should be asking, well, what did it do for the organizational value? Reception. I'm going to talk about this one later. I think it's a very important point. This is simply the handling. Did I get the information? In the old days, it used to be, did I watch a TV show? Or did I open the newspaper up and read an article? Today, it is an involvement with media outputs. And this is the first place, notice, that the recipient gets involved in the process. We can correlate this with activities. I'm going to raise a question in a moment, which I'll discuss in a moment about, is this engagement? The use of this, again, I think is primarily within the PR group to manage their activities, to allocate their assets, to determine where they're showing organizational value. Here we get to a more important stage I'll call outtakes. Even in English, it's an ugly word. But we have outputs, outtakes, outcomes. These are really communications results, and this is the most important. Because this is often where public relations works. We're working on, are we bringing around cognitive change in people in terms of what I call the communications lifestyle? Are we building awareness? Are we building knowledge? Are we building relevance? Are we getting stakeholders to take action, or in some cases not to take action? Are we getting advocacy? Are we building relationships with our stakeholders? As somebody described yesterday, building relationships is really critical for us. This is when we get to information that I feel is valuable for a CMO. It's valuable to share with marketing and communications executives. It may be valid to share with people in advertising, with organizational peers, because this is where we're really getting traction and doing what we are trying to do. We're not always building sales. In fact, I think most of the work that I've ever done was not centered around sales, was centered around some other kind of organizational activity. So again, these are different columns where you can set up your metrics. Then we get communications results. And by the way, the exact words, the exact terms, the exact structures here are not what's important. What really is important is take a communications theory from one end to the other, chunk it up into different elements, and align your metrics within those columns or boxes, so that you may be doing a narrow slice of media measurement, but always remember that's, media is only important because it builds organizational value. And even if you're doing a little bit, it's better to recognize the limits of what we're doing than I've seen clients walk into a CMO's office and they lose credibility because they're trying to puff up what they're doing. Communications results are specific desired behaviors. These will lead to organizational outcomes. And finally, business results. Look, this depends on the very specific situation you are in. Go back, as Dario Coutin, Edgar Mata said yesterday, talk about your organizational objectives and link the methods here to your organizational objectives. By taking this, my recommendation is that we look and we, as a field, try to adopt a standard framework. You can vary it, it doesn't matter. This, I have borrowed this and adapted this from many other people, including friends at several PR agencies, including Ketchum, Edelman, Weber Shandwick, just to name a few. But if it's a framework within which we can all work, we will all be approaching our CMOs, CCOs with a similar thoughtful process. Will be in better ground.